Alright, so, welcome class. I want to start off today with a quote by Joyce Carol Oates. You might not know exactly what the quote means, but I just want you to take it in. Reading is the sole means by which we slip involuntarily, often helplessly, into another's skin, another's voice, another's soul. This class is going to be about trying to understand what a story is, what is a fiction story specifically. And before we can ask that question, we should ask ourselves why we should care. Let's talk about why we read fiction. Why do we read stories that aren't true in the strictest sense? I think it's because reading fiction is magic. I really do believe that. I believe fiction is magic because we get to be someone that we've never been. We get to go somewhere that we couldn't go to, and we get to time travel. You might say we get to do all of these things playing video games or watching movies, but why is fiction different than video games and movies? Well, reading fiction has a lot in common with playing video games and watching movies, but in fiction, your imagination and not somebody else's are the graphics. You get to direct the movie in your head. And I think that this is important and special and magical. It's the difference between watching magic and doing magic. For example, let's say that you watch a movie about a gorilla. When you watch the movie, you can see that the gorilla is right there in front of you. There's no question about what that gorilla looks like or how it moves. But when you read a story about a gorilla, the author of the story is asking you to make up your own gorilla. It's like someone else letting you have their dream. If the gorilla has a scarf, you make up how that scarf feels, how it smells. Maybe that scarf smells like the gorilla's grandmother, which smells like your grandmother. Maybe it makes you feel safe or makes you feel sad. Maybe they can even tell you things about that gorilla that you would never know just by looking at a film of a gorilla. In video games, you get to choose your own path. Your actions determine how the story ends, and maybe the story is less important than the problems that you have to solve, like in Fortnite, or you're a part of a story, but that story is just solving a problem with your friends. Or in Super Smash Bros., you're telling the story of how you're trying to win against each other. In fiction, you are a part of the story. You get to see how others make decisions, while you create the world where the story takes place in your head, seeing the characters make decisions that you would never think to make on your own. So I want to read a story as an example, and then talk a little bit more about why it's important to read fiction. So I'll read the story out loud. Nighttime Knitting by Mascall. A gorilla is living in my cupboard. Every night, he swaggers onto my bed and waits for me to wake up. I pretend to be asleep, but hear his knitting needles clicking together. He is making a very long scarf for me. Squinting at him under my blanket, I see his huge hands scratch his scalp in disappointment. He looks sad. A pang of guilt hits me. I sit up, and he hands me a ball of pink wool. His watery eyes meet my gaze. He's lonely. We lean against each other and knit until sunrise. A gorilla in your room is a nightmare. They are huge and they can't smell that great, and they are definitely able to destroy all your favorite things in your room. But after you see he's doing something nice for you, like knitting a very long scarf, don't you feel a little sorry for him? Don't you feel like you understand that gorilla a little bit better? Reading fiction is all about taking scary things or difficult things and letting you be a part of them. from a safe distance, and hopefully coming out understanding other people or other gorillas a little better. In other words, reading fiction is about empathy. Empathy is about caring about other people by understanding them. As you get older, maybe you start to realize that other people are difficult to understand. The things that they've gone through and the things they think are sometimes different than you, and maybe you will never really totally understand other people, but you can take the things that you understand about yourself and use them to help you understand other people. Maybe a gorilla feels sorry for doing something that hurt you. Maybe you don't understand why the gorilla hurt you or what it did exactly, but you do know what it feels like to be sorry about something that you've done, so you forgive the gorilla. And that's empathy. Maybe another reason you read stories is so that you can understand your own past. All of us have ancestors, grandpas and grandmas, and they had grandpas and grandmas, and they had grandpas and grandmas, and their ancestors have stories, and their ancestors have stories, and those are our ancestors too. There's a reason why we're all here. We're all here because we were born, and there were lots of people that needed to be born before us and had to go through so many things in order to get to where we are sitting right now. Every moment that you're alive is special. And every moment that you get to be around other people is special because the whole history of the world led up to it. So let's come back to the original question. If reading stories helps us become better at understanding one another and the past, our ancestors, our grandparents, then why is understanding a story important? If you understand the parts of a story, all the things that make up a story, the characters, the place where it takes place, the plot, the themes, the rising and falling action, you can begin to understand how to be understood. You can learn how to feel really connected to other people. And you can understand how to really ask for help when you really need it. How to express love, and how to explain what's hurting you, and how to make people laugh so hard that they don't feel sad anymore for a little while. Your story is just as important as the stories that we're going to read together in the class. So, first things first, let's talk about Story Mountain. Every story, including the gorilla story, has some basic parts, features, you could call them. If every story is like a mountain, all mountains have certain things in common, like they go up and then they go down. These are the basic features: exposition, conflict, rising action, climax, falling action, and conclusion, or resolution. First, every story has exposition. Exposition is background information that you need in order to understand the main problem or the conflict of the story. This is like a map of the world in which the story takes place. This may be a country that we don't know much about, or our own neighborhood through someone else's eyes, or a universe that the author made up in their head. In this case, the exposition in this story that we just read is, there is a gorilla living in my cupboard. It gives us what we need to know. It gives us both characters, the person telling the story, my cupboard, and the description of the gorilla in that it tells you where it lives. Second, there's a conflict. The conflict is the challenge that the main character of the story needs to deal with in order to achieve their goals. In this case, the conflict is this. Every night, he swaggers into my bedroom and waits for me to wake up. I pretend to be asleep, but I hear his knitting needles clicking together. He's making a very long scarf for me. The person telling the story has a gorilla coming into their room at night. Not only that, but he's knitting. They obviously don't like that because they're pretending to be asleep. Next comes the rising action. Rising action are all the things that happen related to the conflict of the story, which make the story more and more complicated and build tension and suspense. In our example, squinting at him from under my blanket, I see his huge hairy hands scratch his scalp in disappointment. He looks sad. a pang of guilt hits me. The gorilla is in the room. Not only is the gorilla in the room, but it's knitting. Not only is it knitting, but it's disappointed that I'm not awake to help it make the scarf. Next is the climax of the story. The climax is the point of highest tension, where there's the most drama. In this example, I sit up and he hands me a ball of pink wool. His watery eyes meet my gaze. Our hero stops pretending to be asleep. Our hero opens themselves up to all the possibilities and threats of acknowledging the gorilla in their bedroom, handing them a scarf. Everything has been climbing to this moment. They are looking at each other in the eyes, and the eyes are watery. That is the moment the tension is building to. After that comes the falling action. His watery eyes meet my gaze. He is lonely. This is the understanding that the character needed to achieve in order to break the tension happening in the story. The small sentence is the falling action in the story because it is after the turning point that changes the fate of the main character. This is the beginning of the end. They are beginning to understand one another. The tension is dissipating. Finally, there's the conclusion, which is also called the denouement, which is French for the final part. Conflicts are solved, and calm returns. It is the resolution of the story. We lean against each other and knit until sunrise. So let's go back to why I'm telling you all of this, just one more time. Let's say I told you I stayed up all night knitting with a gorilla. Now, first of all, you wouldn't believe me. Second, you would think I was crazy. And third, you wouldn't really understand why I would do that even if I wasn't crazy. But if I showed you the story to explain why I stayed up all night knitting with a gorilla, you would understand that it was because the gorilla was lonely. You would understand how it felt to look at that gorilla in its watery eyes. You could understand why I might stay up all night. But the best part of this story, and any story really, is that it leaves you with questions. Why was the gorilla so nice? Why was it maybe feeling guilty? What if this gorilla represents something? What if the gorilla is a metaphor? We know what metaphors are for something else. What if the gorilla represents sadness in the author's life? What if we started to think of sadness as a gorilla living in a cupboard and coming out at night? What could the scarf represent in that case? What lessons could we learn about sadness by thinking about our sadness as a gorilla that knits scarves at night? I will leave you with these questions for now. But next time, we'll talk a little bit more about the different ways to tell stories, and how to interpret the stories that we read, and how to explain those ideas to each other. Before you go, I'd like to read you one last thing. It's another story. You don't have to analyze it yet. We will, but not yet. I just want you to sit on it. It's called Stories by John Edgar Wideman. A man is walking in the rain eating a banana. Where is he coming from? Where is he going? Why is he eating a banana? How hard is the rain falling? Where did he get the banana? What's the banana's name? How fast is the man walking? Does he mind the rain? What does he have on his mind? Who is asking all these questions? Who is supposed to answer them? Why? Does it matter? How many questions about a man walking in the rain, eating a banana are there? Is the previous question one of them, or is it just another kind of question, not about the man or the walking or the rain? If not, what's it a question about? Does each of these questions raise another question? If so, what's the point? If not, what is the final question? What will the If not, what will the final question be? Does the man know any of the answers? Does he enjoy bananas, walking in the rain? Can the man feel the weight of eyes on him, the weight of questions? Why does the banana's bright yellow seem the only color, the last possible color remaining in a gray world with a gray scrim of rain turning everything grayer? I know question after question after question. The only answer I know is this. All stories that I could have made from this man walking in the rain eating a banana would be sad unless I'm behind a window with you looking out at him. All right, that's it for today.